Alrighty. Well, good afternoon or good morning, good evening, wherever everyone's coming from. Thank you for joining my session. I am coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am currently the principal CEO at Passport Academy Charter School. And I want to tell you a little bit about my school first, so that way you can kind of get an understanding of some of what we're doing. So this is in Pittsburgh. This is called the Golden Triangle. This is where three rivers emerge together, and they call this the Point. So if you see anyone that's ever been to Pittsburgh, or if you've seen pictures, this is probably the picture that you see. This is the famous fountain, which is a lot of people visit, and that's kind of where they go. But my school is an urban school. It's literally right here, pretty much close to these buildings right down here on Penn Avenue, which is located in the cultural district. So Pittsburgh is, it's a very small individual city, but is very spread out, and the suburbs, reach many miles. So, but my school is designed for students that have had challenges getting their high school diploma. So we are a high school. We are a high school that is for non-traditional students. So we all know that the pandemic has caused many challenges for everyone, in the education and business everywhere. But my students come to us if they have dropped out of school, if they have been deemed a dropout by their district. So that means if they miss so many days of school, they're considered a dropout. If they have a child and need to drop out of school, if they've by chance been involved in the juvenile probation system and they need a flexible environment that'll work with them to get their diploma, that's my school. So this past year we had 75 students graduate, and those students traditionally in the past were not successful in their former school district. So we got them across the finish line, and for me, a success is definitely getting them there, but then how are we making sure that we're embedding skills into we're helping them, support them with skills that are going to help them in their post-secondary career path. So that may mean ready for college, that mean ready for trade school, ready for the careers. So our goal is to try to make sure that we are really looking at each student as and support them through a personalized approach. So we have an advisory model with the students, and it's one of the pieces that sometimes we take for granted, that a student that has that maybe is working at a fast food restaurant, like those are all skills that you need for community or for customer service and so forth. But we try to make sure that everything that we do is kind of catered towards what their career plans are. So one of the challenges that at my school, I started here 2 years ago, literally in the middle of the pandemic. My school is downtown. We're in a building that's 8 floors. We actually lease 2 of the floors. We didn't really have any hardware or a makerspace at all, which we still don't. And what we do is, I'm gonna jump here for a second, but what we started with is I found in one of the upstairs conference rooms a small 3D printer. And so I wonder why it was there. Was something wrong with it? And from kind of asking the teachers, there was no one that was like really embedding any kind of maker activities or learning into the school. And I was kind of questions like, well, is it broke? No, it still works, And so my question was like, why isn't this happening? And what are the challenges and barriers? Sometimes it was, having a small staff. Sometimes people didn't understand what it was. And so we made sure that we had a discussion around these skills and how we're embedding them into the classrooms. So I'm going to start with asking everyone a question, and you could, jump into the chat or turn your mic off. In your profession, what have been some successes that you've had with utilizing maker activities? So anyone want to go first? Any successes? Anyone have like a really expensive lab or expensive hardware that students are using?
Hey, so this is Tim. I work for a community college, and one of the successes we had with a small makerspace was biology students coming in and printing with hemp so they could run tests on microbes. And
Great.
we had just opened the space, and I was outside, and this young woman was very frantic. And I said, "What's your problem?" And she said, "Oh, I can't get in the room." And she said, "You have a key?" And I said, "I do." And she actually got these things that she had printed. So that was a real success. You don't think of community college as being research, but here's a 20-year-old doing research.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I will I will go from, like, my former school was a private school, and literally we had the best lab. We had a $250,000 lab. And what we were doing was, like, each class, it was a private school, so we had thematic units that all used the lab, from the beginning of their freshman until they were senior. We had a program where everyone was introduced to the lab. So we did that with intentionality and making sure that students were getting all those skills. So now I don't have that lab, and so we kind of start from scratch in what we do. So, and I'm going to flip this question and ask you as far as challenges. And Tim, thank you for sharing that. So I definitely am going to speak on some of the challenges, but from any of you that are out there working in makerspaces or some type of capacity, what challenges have you had, or maybe challenges that you've heard others have?
In my case, I'm from Fab Lab Oulu in Finland. In my case, I think one of the big challenge, we have a Fab Lab in the university, and we had a lot of resources, but we didn't have the community. So it has been really hard to build a community that go often there to the Fab Lab. They contribute to the other students, and still is challenging for us. So we have a lot of equipment, but we don't have a community. We don't have the people. Perhaps building these communities has been one of the main challenges.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. I would totally understand that one. Anyone else?
So I'm also at a community college in Corning, New York, and I've been teaching art, specifically 3D design and ceramics. And I've always, in the last 10 years or so, we've done a CAD project. And originally I was using SketchUp and then moved to Tinkercad. And we didn't have any 3D printers for the students to print their models. We were turning the files over to our engineering faculty. And in the last, I'd say 2 semesters, we've had problems where their 3D printers were down or something was going on. And so, I've been building up this expectation in the students' heads that their designs would be printed, and then have to tell them later after the fact that, no, we can't print them this semester because our tools are not working. Luckily, we're building our own makerspace, and then the faculty will have more sort of ability to deal with that, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the the functionality. And sometimes when schools, working in a school, you have, you think about your budgeted items of, like, well, maybe we can get a cheaper brand versus this, and that's definitely, you get what you pay for sometimes. I've had a lot of people that have reached out to me and say, hey, here's a great one, you can try this. I always like to do my research. Honestly, I've called Liz a couple times, and she's like, stay away from that product and this, you're gonna have to fix it. So that's definitely some challenges when you're, and being in a classroom, and you're totally dependent upon, the things that you're doing with the classroom. And then when you can't have a finished product and your outcome, it gets affected, that kind of, like, you lose that, the motivation sometimes. And especially when you get so hyped up with your students, and they're like, well, it's broke or this. And so that's definitely some of those challenges that, that are going to hurt the process sometimes. So when I mentioned that my school and my students that come here, when you're in a district or in a school setting K-12, and you have a very strategic plan of, like, first graders are going to learn this and second graders are going to learn this, there's a plan. So when you're working with students who have maybe dropped out or maybe have not had the best success in their former life, sometimes they have not had some of these skills embedded. And so sometimes they're, we're working from scratch, where we're working with a 17-year-old who is just learning Tinkercad, versus, a second grader who has it embedded into their program. So that's one of the challenges for me is, you're starting from scratch with the students, having the motivation, but then also not having any supports or hardware in the building other than a 3D printer. So we kind of had to really think about how we were using our community. You know, Ivan, you mentioned the same thing. How do you build that community? That's definitely, you know, something as an administrator who believes in this type of learning, like, no problem. Hey, let's do it. Let's get it happening. But if you're in a building that, you know, you have to make sure that it meets exact standards, and, you know, nothing wrong with that. But that's sometimes a challenge when you're kind of facing, do I take a day to learn Tinkercad, or do I take a day to learn this particular standard? That's definitely a challenge. So what we kind of did here at Passport, and we're still building this out a little bit. You know, I'm a really I favor utilizing the community as much as possible for whatever we're doing in the classroom. You know, I'm a big PBL person, so, you know, you think about the community experts. You know, you think of some of the limitations in a school, where sometimes in the business world and some of these community partners, they may have the best, you know, up to date, you know, hardware and software, and they may have the training, because that's what they do. They focus on some of those things. So what we started to do this year is really look at our students, and how we were looking at where some of the barriers are and the challenges are, and how can we work around places in our community that are close to our students, but also places that we can hop on a bus or the trolley or possibly walk to. So that way we can get students exposed to some of these things in their community. So like when I mentioned before about the Pittsburgh and the Three Rivers, so right here, the Central Business District, which is downtown. And then we picked 4 different places within our community to try to work with our students and try to, you know, utilize some of their expertise, some of their training, and some of their hardware and software. So right over here, we're going to start from the left to right. This area over here is also called the North Side. You have the North Side, you know, the East Side, West Side, and South Side. So on the North Side, we have Manchester Craftsmen's Guild. So Manchester was actually started years ago. It's actually an employment center that provides free training to adults that have their diploma or GED. And so they are very strategic in doing, you know, medical billing. There's culinary, there's some basic pharmaceuticals and different things. And this is a free program that started, I think, back in the 70s, when there was such a need for skilled workers. And so they, you know, the founder said, hey, let's build this place so we can provide these things and provide, you know, jobs for the region. So they also have a youth area where they focus on, you know, screen printing and making, and they have a maker studio, and they have, you know, professional studio. They have a jazz place. I think that the jazz won an Emmy or something, but again, they are a place that's where most of our students are located. The Carnegie Science Center, which you'll hear, I think we have a couple of people that are presenting on that today too, is a place literally for our students. We go about 2 blocks, hop on the trolley, and the trolley is free downtown, and we drive over to the science, or we take the trolley to the Science Center. We've utilized their lab before, and we'll continue to do that because they, you know, provide excellent professional development and also do great work with our students. And then if you look over here, this is in the Hill District in the Pittsburgh area, which has Hack Pittsburgh. And Hack Pittsburgh is a 24-hour makerspace that you buy you know, a subscription to, and then you have to get trained on each of the items, and then you can go at your own leisure. So we've actually found some grant funding to help support our staff and our students going there if they need to check out the fob to go in, you know, over the weekend or whatever. So that's kind of how we're building out that, you know, the understanding of how makerspaces are, you know, can work with some of our students who have some of the challenges. And then further down here in Hazelwood is a place called the Industrial Arts Workshop. And I can put the links in the chat when we finish, but they are basically a welding and art hub. And so, you know, they do training. They try to, right now they have summer training for students. And then it's like they'll finish like the 101 version of welding. So they have, you know, training on site, and then they try to help you also connect you with jobs. So again, these are 4, there's a couple other ones we haven't used as much, but these are 4 that we've utilized a ton. And I will attribute some of this type of learning to a volunteer that we had come in that work with our students. Let me get through here. That work with our students, and he came in and he wanted to make to have a hydroponic studio. I met him working with youth, and so he said, I want to volunteer some time, come in, you know, work with your science teacher, and I came in and started doing herbs and growing some peppers in our science class with our science teacher. So that kind of started some of our maker activities, because having the students' attention and engagement first was one of the big things of like the curiosity of like, well, why would I grow peppers? Why would I do this? Something that gets the kids engaged and where they want to kind of come back and do more and tie it to food and eating. So when we talk about a lot of this start of making, and you're going to see a lot of examples that I will give as far as the teachers, you know, one of the big things is how do you get the buy-in from your teachers and your staff? Because when we mentioned about that as a challenge sometimes, that you know, maybe there's not the buy-in or there's not the culture and the community around what making looks like. You know, you have to have the buy-in for the teachers. So you know, as I want my teachers to explore and engaging students, I made sure that we had some professional development around this. And so again, you know, using the you know, the 3D printers and the laser engravers and the vinyl cutters, some of the basic things, and then having a brainstorm around with my teachers of saying, do you see how, you know, you as adults become engaged? How do you think some of our students become engaged by using some of this learning? And a lot of it came around, you know, engagement of making things, and then how students could even use this as a side hustle, earning some money, you know, turn into our budding entrepreneurs. And so that was a really important part of making sure that my staff were bought into it, and then they could make sure that they're embedding some of these activities into their lessons. So when we mentioned before about the industrial arts workshop, again, this is a community-based maker space welding with a welding focus. You know, this is one of our approaches to getting students exposed, understanding that this is a valid career, and also making sure that, you know, when you think about going to a trade school, you're going to have to, you know, get in the proper uniform, and it's going to be hot depending on the conditions. That was probably our biggest complaint from our students that went, that it was hot, obviously because they were welding. But on top of it all, they had a fantastic time, and a couple of them were actually enrolled in some of their summer programs. When we talk about, you know, even starting with the planning, and you may ask, well, how is the planning, you know, kind of combined with the making? So for this example, this was, you know, a student who actually learned to grow some of lettuces and basil. But what her kind of connection was to making is she would use different molds. You can kind of see here, using different molds to make different maker activities with like plant plots. And so she would use, you know, this was like a mold, and it would, you know, kind of pour in some thin set concrete and then make like little dinosaur eggs. So the part behind, you know, wasn't just the making or growing and the harvesting of the plants, but she saw that different opportunities to make different planters. She actually used concrete molds. And so we were going to hack Pittsburgh to use their molding machine to then again, you know, make different planters that she would sell. So this was something that, you know, they were making 25 bucks a pop off of these, and we would sell them at, you know, vendor shows and everything else, and super duper came engaged with kind of maker activities into the classroom. She actually, her senior project was on entrepreneurship. And so she used a lot of her experience throughout the year to kind of share and talk about how she made money through these skills that she was engaged with. You could see the same thing in Pittsburgh, and this is literally my school is right here. In Pittsburgh, the first week of June is the art festival. And so a lot of the end of the year activities were focused on the making of some of the basic trinkets and different things that we could use. And literally the art festival was about 2 blocks away. So one of my staff members sat down with a group of students and said, hey, you want to give this a whirl and give this a try? And they had learned that, you know, the foot traffic was all coming in front of our school. So all the things that they, you know, that they were making, they also learned some of the customer service skills. So they were actually doing a little hustle, making some of these activity or making some of the different trinkets and so forth. And I know one of the young ladies made, I think, a couple $100s in a weekend. Because literally they were talking, they were marketing, and who wants to, you know, everyone wants to support a high school budding entrepreneur. So it was a really cool activity to see the excitement of like, hey, I'm going to keep leveling up and earn some more money, because, you know, they get to see the value in what they made and how much it costs. So when we think about the making piece, again, it's sometimes you may think that it's just what we're doing in our lab, But for me, it's the connection to how are students learning these skills and how are they transferring into their post-secondary career. So this young man was one of our students who graduated, and literally learning about, making and how within the building of some of the activities that we're doing, and then how that connects to careers. This is actually me, and I'm a firm believer in you have to model and you have to kind of jump in and roll up your sleeves. I didn't roll up my sleeves on this one, but this is how I get my kids engaged. The 3 or 4 that we took on a tour in the community were like, oh, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, and I may have had to barter a little bit and maybe throw a gift card to them. But after they saw the connection of like, this is what was happening when they were doing some of this, making concrete planners in the building, of how it's connected to post-secondary and then masonry. So again, we had a couple students enroll in this program that's local here in Pittsburgh. This was, you can see a variety of the different things that the students are learning how to make. Again, this young lady was one that was in the beginning was a kind of not very excited about this type of learning, but then just kind of really just got sucked into it. As you see here, and I have a flyer up here a little bit, but she was learning how to use the laser engraver to do bamboo earrings. So they were personalizing earrings, which was a hot seller. Students loved it, and she was learning that she could purchase these off of Amazon for a couple bucks. She could, add the 3D printing, do personalized custom earrings and sell them for 25 bucks. And so that was a hustle that she really loved to see, because she just really became engaged in this. Even after she graduated, she actually came by and wanted to sell and share some of the things that she did. So you can see the variety of the 3D printing stuff, using some different images. There's cutting boards. Again, this is kind of the starting pieces. This is anything super duper abstract, but our students really became excited because of the simplicity of some of these things, and using some of our maker spaces that were literally right within our community. Again, here's the flyer a little bit. Again, once kids see that they could do this as an activity, and then if they want to kind of level up and continue to work and sell those, they can. But we made it pretty simple, where as soon as we talk about engagement, students came in the door to sign in for the day. Literally, they could pull up their cell phone, go to the QR code, put their name in there, and then they would have to meet at the time that we had the studio open. We were doing some of the basic stuff upstairs, but it was super personalized to the students, and that's how we kind of sucked them in a little bit, because once they saw this, like, oh, what are these bamboo earrings? And then it was a way to get the kids engaged a little bit. Again, some of these students here are some of our makers that, as we're thinking about some of these maker activities and the harvesting and growing some of the plants and plant pots, we're also teaching the students about some of the skills around, harvesting the plants, and then making sure that, at the end they get to see that they're making healthy nutrition choices and so forth. So we always celebrate, usually when there's a harvest of some plants, again, not maker stuff, but definitely nutrition. This was one of the pieces where we talked about the students making, they were using, as you see inside, I think they were, this is a concrete mold, and they were using old beer bottles, not just beer bottles, but old glass bottles. And they would break the top of it off, and that was the form of our plant pots that the students, again, they would harvest them, and then they would sell the different plant pots. Again, at the very end of the day, they think they sold these plant pots for like $20 or $25. And so the kids saw the simplicity of getting an old bottle, making a form, and then being able to personalize it on the end. The kids came really excited about this. This is an example of one of the molds that they used. The Hack Pittsburgh is the one that does these molds. The machine, I forget the exact name of it, but they would come out with the rubber molds, and then you kind of dip in and put the different, the quick set in there, and then students can make them. These are a hot seller because they look like the dinosaur eggs. This is Hack Pittsburgh, which is in up in the Hill District in Pittsburgh. Again, maker shop. We don't have this opportunity in our school, so we try to use these as much as possible with our students. Again, and then the other part to this, having all the different things that students made, learning the entrepreneurship behind it. This is actually up near the University of Pittsburgh, and having a young studio that would be willing to have and showcase some of our students' work. So that's again how we were, showing students the validity and earning some money with, some of the creating some art. And you can see some other examples of this. Again, all the creativity of the students. You can see the snake one little here doing the maker pieces. Again, some of these things we would make in the building. Some of the different designs, they would first want to design them, and then they would cut them on the 3D printer up at our makerspaces, depending on where we would go. Again, some examples of using, having the proper setup and, customer service. And then the other part that we started to see here is, using the 3D printer or the laser engraver to use, make these different designs, and then to put different like jewels and so forth, and then using epoxy in different colors. Students really became engaged in those and making different necklaces and different things. This is something that literally you could cut a whole bunch of these on a one sheet in the laser engraver, and then be able to sell these for $20-$25. So you can see again when we go to the different labs, sometimes we don't have the different hardware and software. So this is one that when we hack Pittsburgh, we'd visit there and use their machines and so forth. And then you can see some more examples of some of the work. Again, if you see the smile on the kids' faces, these were some students that we kind of had to pull in and get them excited about the learning. But after they saw the buy-in and they saw the excitement of being able to do this, again, and lots of times, you get Mother's Day, you got Christmas, you get all those things. Instead of having to have money out of their pocket, a lot of our students were, they were learning to make gifts for their family. Here's some different cutting boards and, earrings and so forth. They were pretty simple to make, but once the kids see the value in it and have the markup. One of the pieces that we really try to do with our students is when we have artists and makers that are living in the community, we try to bring them in a little bit. So this was actually a gentleman that got really brought into the making scene, and he was met up at Hack Pittsburgh, who also ended up being a DJ. And so that was a big part of engaging, getting our kids excited. And so he may talk to them about, being a DJ, but then he also may talk about it like, hey, here's a way to have a little, learn how to use some of our, community assets and some of the maker spaces. So definitely a huge, when you he was a couple years out of high school, bringing him in, inviting him to talk to the students. It kind of, really the students found and kind of connected with them a little bit. Again, this is a student as they were, they would make the, make their files at the school and then have to go up and work. I think this is actually one over the Christmas break that the kids had using the laser engraver. And I'll go back to this. And one of the biggest things, this is a student, I think this is her first time. I think she was actually videotaping it, seeing the laser go back and forth, first time seeing that, and you're seeing how it, creates, your piece of work, that's the excitement, and get them kids, get the students kind of, sucked in a little bit. Some examples of some of the students' work that they were selling. And then here's the example of our hydroponic studio that, that we had in-house. But again, you could see there's a little bit of area over here that they would do some of the maker pieces, make some of the plant pots and so forth. And then if they needed to level up a little bit, they would go up and take it to the studio. And again, it started just with a couple plants, and then that's literally how some of our maker activities really become engaged. Students doing the plants, doing the earrings, and then that was the excitement of finding that there's maker spaces within their community. This is actually our valedictorian doing the same thing. Again, kind of seeing the different, we're urban school, about 95% African American. Literally just trying to connect as much as possible of, making sure that they have some skills that lead them to post-secondary. So I finished up a little bit early, so I'm going to leave it and we can go back to the slides if you have any questions. But again, I'm not sure if where you are, if there's any maker spaces in your community. So can I take any questions?
Do we have any questions for you?
Sorry, I might have missed this, but do the makerspaces charge you fees for access?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges, and that's where we seek some grant funding. And again, if I could tie it in through a budget with professional development, that's where I'll use it as a school budget. But the challenge is, you know, and again, my school serves students 16 to 21. The Carnegie Science Center is more on, you know, the K to 12 world, but some of our community maker spaces, students do have to be 18 years old. And so that's definitely a challenge. And so for me, I don't want that to be a barrier. So if it is, you know, something that I will purchase a membership and I'll just keep it open, like for a teacher, you know, and I know that there's a student that's 18 that needs to have access to it, I'll just let them use the, you know, you have them use the membership.
And at one particular time, do you have like multiple students in different spaces by themselves?
So we try to support them at first to making sure that they understand some of the expectations. Again, you know, you don't want to bring an 18-year-old the first time of not knowing how to use a particular machine. So we take them through the beginning stages. So if they're focusing on the 3D printer or the laser engraver, you know, they have to have that credential. They have to pass the test to get to have access to that. So we make sure that we start them, and then if they want to go in the weekend or any other time, you know, just make sure that they're limited of what they could do. But yeah, that's the art for us. We want to kind of create that culture that making is not just in school. You know, you can do it outside of school and, you know, become a hobby and learn to make some money on the side. And I think there was a question yesterday that someone asked about, you know, the motivation. How do you have students that get motivated to want to use the lab? For us, you know, and I'm going to be quite honest, some of our students really, they want to get their diploma and be done. Okay. And so for us, I want to kind of put some of these opportunities in there because that's going to be the hook to kind of, you know, have students say, hey, maybe I can use this as a post-secondary opportunity, or, hey, I'm making some money right now. Could I open up a studio or do some of these things? You know, sometimes the money is the motivation, but I don't want to not do something that maybe engage one student. But I can tell you over the last year that we've been doing this, you know, more systematically, there's been probably maybe triple the number of students that have been interested than the year before. So whether that's attributing that to coming out of the pandemic, you know, a year and a half ago, these spaces weren't open. And so, you know, we're just trying to make sure that, you know, what are we not doing as a institution to engage our diploma or our students who are graduating? Thank you for the question, Jean.
I don't want to, oh, go ahead.
I see many happy pictures with small groups of students. Do you also encounter classes, complete classes of 25 people that you have to manage inside the lab? And how are you going to give them a good experience if they have to share? You cannot share one 3D printer with 25 people, then only one person can print something. And how are you dealing with that if it happens?
So usually when we do the like the community maker spaces, it's a limited group. So, you know, eight or 10, depending on seat and so forth. But having the one 3D printer, we kind of did hit that challenge a little bit this year. The teacher did a great job of, you know, having class time embedded for, here's how we, you know, they'll put it up on the screen, the projector. Here's, you know, the teaching of using Tinkercad or whatever program. And then it was understood that, you know, in a 2-week thematic unit that, you know, their heart or whatever they did to tie into that lesson, it's not going to be printed the same day if they want to stay after school to do it. So again, it's not a super duper fancy 3D printer. So that is more of the classroom management type piece. You know, making sure the kids are, you know, if they want it printed to come in before school or after school, knowing, and they understand that, hey, this print may take an hour and a half. And so definitely as we look at budgeting and we look at some grant writing, you know, to make sure that we have some of those things, you know, the lower level kind of maker things, you know, within the building. So trying to level up a little bit and get some more things, you know, a little bit at a time. Thank you.
Okay, but as far as they need a computer for design activities, you have enough computers so that they can all use a computer on their own, etc. So that
correct.
it is easier to replicate 10 is 3D printed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't do Chromebooks, but we have small laptops, and so some of the basic things can be downloaded on the computers. So that's, we're lucky to have those. I was in a school that had Chromebooks, and that's a whole other piece where you don't have the download capability. So I was super against, because it's an easy option and it's cheap, but I wanted to pay the little bit extra to knowing that if we're going to take this type of approach with learning, that students need to have ownership in downloading and editing and so forth. So, but definitely a challenge when you think about, how to do this in a large setting. So again, if we had something more in person here, we would probably be able to have a little bit more students, but we kind of have to meet the needs of what each of our, our local makerspaces can have it. So if they say, hey, you have 10 students or 10 people, we have to have 9 staff members and or 9 students and 1 staff member. So we have to, that's definitely a challenge sometimes.
Thank you.
Sorry, Joe, is your students is this a separate like class, like an elective? Or is this, so do they get elective credit, or like, how do you work that out?
Sure. So, and I'm going to stop because it says I have like 3 minutes, so I can't share anymore, but I'm going to stop this real quick. For some of the classes where the teachers are doing some of these activities, they're doing project-based learning activities within the class. And so, like, for example, the planning, that was actually introduced in a biology unit. And so I think like the lead into that unit was like making the planters. And then once they saw that, they would, start to grow the seeds and then basically having to grow something for their planters. So that's how we do it. Our program is flexible. It's a half-day program for students. So they, depending on, their need, they come either in the morning or the afternoon. And so, again, some of these things, we do have an advisory period, which, again, the advisory could look like, sitting down in a circle, talking about how your weekend was. It could be doing classwork, or it could be like, hey, can I go up and work in the studio and do it? So we, again, try to be flexible as possible. A small school, in the morning, we probably might have 100 students in the building, on a good day. So we're trying to work with what we have to, engage our students as much as possible in some of these activities. And I have a big belief. I'm actually going to school right now to get my PhD for community engagement. I have a belief, and that I think if we continue to set some of these things up for students, that this will continue to lead to some better post-secondary experiences. So if we're not being strategic and leading them up to the end, then students may settle with just working at a $10 an hour job. Where I think that if we find that students can do this and say, hey, do you know that what you're doing is what they're doing? They're doing coding over at the at the mill. I think there's opportunities right now, and we think about the economic mobility in our region. It's going to start from what they're doing in school. So. Any more questions?
We have a little bit more than 1 minute, so it has to be quick.
Yeah.
I just want to put out an idea for Pieter. I have a fab lab on site at school, and I often have 25 to 35 kids in my classroom all the time. And so for the laser cutter and the 3D printer, I use a queue system. So because the majority, 90% of the time is spent on actually creating digital files. So they create the digital files, and then they join a queue, and I will print it in the evening, and according to the queue. And so it's sort of like, if you want to focus and actually get your 3D printed stuff done, then yeah, you're up there. If not, it might be 3 months until it comes up on the queue.
I can say from in my former school that had that lab, that was definitely a challenge too, of how to build a system that gets put in place so that their things can be printed or created. And a lot of kids would stay away from 3D printers after they knew that it may take multiple hours or days, depending on the complexity of their build. So students would like, the easy part was the laser engraver, because it would cut it pretty fast, and then they would do their thing. So
Yeah, I try to make my 3D printer broken most of the time.
yeah.
Because a lot of times I have to go home, and I have 3 at home, so I'll actually end up printing at home, not at school.
Yeah. I want to thank you guys all for joining, and hopefully that there was something that you kind of learned from this. It's kind of starting from scratch, but knowing that if we are deliberate in doing some of these things with some non-traditional students, that it's going to lead to some successes. And we're seeing that a little bit. And if I ask a student if they want to stay after do something, now it's like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a whirl. So we're trying to create that culture a little bit in that community. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joe, for
Thank you, Joe.